Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Tarris. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining today. The Life Shift podcast is like this wonderful journey that I just never expected for myself. And you're the 150th person that I've been able to interview on this show. And I'm
Ooh,
just so blessed and
congrats.
thank you. It has been quite a journey. And just for anyone listening, before we get into your story, the Life Shift podcast exists because when I was 8 years old, my mom was killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment in my life, when my dad sat me down and told me, everything in my life shifted from what it was going to be to what it became. Because my parents were divorced, we lived in different states. I lived with my mom full time. Everything changed. And so growing up, I didn't really have the resources, or I guess maybe the time period, people weren't talking about mental health or grief, and I was a kid and people thought kids bounce back and, all those things that come along with losing someone. And I was like, do other people have this line in the sand kind of moment in which everything changes? And, as a grown up now, I realize that people have lots of those. They have different ones and how they change them. And I've just had this wonderful experience on the Life Shift podcast of talking to people like you about these moments and how, as an individual, these moments can change us. Either that's in a good way or a bad way. And so thank you again for just wanting to share your story in this way.
Thank you for having me.
It is going to be a good conversation. I think some of your story is something that maybe people can't relate to directly, but I know for a fact that parts of how you felt and the things that came around that people will be able to completely relate to, because it turns out as humans, we have a lot of the same kind of feelings about different moments in our lives. So I'm excited to hear
Absolutely.
your story and what you've done with your pivotal moment. Before we do that, though, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are in 2024 without giving away too much.
Okay. So my name is Tarris Marie. I am a published author and I write right now women's crime novels. And I'm a wife and a mother of two.
Awesome. Well, maybe you can, and this is up to you where you take us, but maybe you can kind of paint the picture of who Tarris was, before this life-shifting moment that really changed everything for you, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So I'm a Midwestern girl, actually. Originally, I'm from Gary, Indiana. And I moved to Houston, Texas about 11 years ago. Prior to that, I lived in Dallas for a year and I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And career wise, I had my dream career, which was in fashion. I started off as an assistant buyer and I worked in the fashion industry for 15 years. I did different things like merchandising, buying. I was
That's
a
fun.
merchandise planner. And so I had, just as far as my career goes, I achieved them. And it was something that I was always interested in. And as a young girl, I used to draw little sketches and stuff like that. So it was, I would say, a dream job for me. And so I was doing that. And then also, as I said earlier, I'm married. So I had my husband, I had my two children. And so that was my life. I
Yeah,
mean,
you were checking all the boxes. Were you kind of like feeling like you were doing the thing?
that's it. I was making the money I wanted to make. I was, had the career that I wanted. And I felt like I was accomplishing everything that I had in my mind of what my life was going to be like.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much, now there were other things that happened prior to that, but right before my pivotal moment, that is what was going on in my life. So
Yeah. Well, growing up, were you said like you had dreamed of this like since you were like 6 years old or something like that, drawing things, and then you were making the life happen that you had always dreamed of. Were you always like a go-getter and someone that like achievement was a thing?
Yes, yes. So I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandfather and my grandmother both were readers. They loved to read, and they exposed me to the arts. So my grandfather loved musicals, and so I love musicals now. And so I kind of had this balanced life, if that makes
Okay.
sense, when it
Yeah.
comes to education as well as the arts. And so I used to do a lot of things like I mentioned earlier. I used to draw little sketches, like fashion sketches. I also used to like create movies. And I mean, I was just a child with a big imagination. But I always had, like I said, this balance between business
Okay.
and my artistic world. So,
So it wasn't always like chase the next dream, get the
right.
next achievement. It was like you were living like the dream, but also comfortable in the dream, and not because a lot of the people I talk to, even
Hmm.
myself, my example is probably more trauma induced of like
Hmm.
having to achieve so that people like accepted or didn't
Hmm.
abandon me in that
Okay.
moment. But
Hmm.
a lot of people I talked to, it was like, they achieved something and they didn't take the time to sit in it and enjoy it. It was more like, what can I do next? What can I do
Hmm.
next? Were you someone that sat in the moment and celebrated yourself and gave yourself your flowers, or was it always on to the next level for you?
I would say it was actually always on to the next level. I want to make sure that, when I say like my grandparents raised me, my mom left when I was 6 years old.
Mm,
And so when she left, then I was then with my grandparents and they raised me. But I did not come from the perfect, or I
right.
don't want to, stereotypical upbringing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I did have, certain issues and certain things that I did have to overcome
Okay.
as a young child. But I feel that my grandparents did a really good job of making sure that they provided a home for me that gave me the foundation that I needed in order to achieve some of the things. Even though we did not have a lot of money,
Yeah.
I wanted to be a dancer also. So like you were saying, dream chaser. And I remember my grandmother took me to the secondhand stores, what we called it, and that's where I got some tap shoes. And then my grandfather was showing me old movies like Stormy Weather and the Nicholas Brothers and
Mm.
Gregory Hines. And he was like, they taught themselves how to tap dance. You could teach yourself. So I used to be down in the basement trying to teach myself how to dance, so
Yeah.
I tried to make the best of my life of what I had at the moment.
Right.
And that's
Well,
something that has always been a part of me, I would say, even now. And I'll get to my pivotal
yeah.
moment in a second. But anytime something would come at me, I would be able to take it and turn it around and find a positive in it
Yeah.
and try to grow from it. Even as a child, I would say, and my faith kept me grounded in that, I would say.
Is that something that came from your grandparents as well?
Actually, my faith and going to church came from my aunts.
Okay.
So where I lived, I grew up where my cousins lived down the street. I grew up in a neighborhood with a bunch of kids, and I used to go outside, ride my bike, do all the things. And so my Aunt Shirley, would pick me up with my cousins, and then would take me to church, and that's where I got my foundation from as far as spiritually. And
Okay.
so,
And
and
then
so
your
that helped.
grandparents gave you like this safety. It almost seems like they made like a safe space for you to explore and dream and do the things that you want. I mean, I'm making assumptions here, but
No,
is that
that's very
true?
true. That's very
Because
true.
I feel like a lot of kids would not be able to find like the silver lining or the
Hmm.
beauty in the madness and those kind of things if they didn't feel safe. So it
Right.
sounds like you had a space where like, hey, you want to do this? Try it, like,
Absolutely.
whereas a lot of people are like, or I felt very much like these were my only roads to go. Like, you have to go to business school, you have to do this, you have to do this. That's
Hmm.
it. Like, I didn't, and maybe I did, but I
Hmm.
didn't feel the space in which I could explore those things in a safe way, because would it lead to a good job? Would it do, like those
Mm.
kind of things. And so,
Now you just hit the hell. Not the hell, but you hit the nail on the head. Now that was my childhood. Now as I got older,
hmm,
that's when my grandparents say, "Okay, all of that was cute.
okay.
Now it's time for you to hone in. What are you going to do? All that other stuff is a hobby,
Yeah.
And when I went to college, I guess that could be my first moment. I went to Florida A&M University, and I was on a journalism scholarship, and still writing didn't hit me.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I went to a symposium And they were showing the salaries of journalism majors versus a business major. And so I was like, I cannot graduate from college making that money,
Mm-hmm.
I needed to get into the business school, and I called my grandmother. I said, oh my God, they just showed the average salary coming out of college for the School of Journalism, and it was $13,000 or $15,000, something like that.
Yeah.
She's like, oh hell no, you got to find something else, And so I was like, okay, So then I had to pivot, right?
Yeah.
And so that's when I looked up Indiana University. They had a 98% placement rate for minorities at the time through the Kelley School of Business. And so I always made good grades. Like I told you, I always had a balance between the
Yeah.
arts and the business. And so I said, for long term, to get the salary that I wanted, then I need to make sure that I, build that foundation in college through the business school. So
Yeah.
my grandmother definitely, so I changed my whole, I did not, walked away from my scholarship, went to Indiana University, got accepted into the Kelley School of Business, which I do not regret. Okay.
Yeah.
But that is where I first did my first pivot,
Oh, yeah.
and that's when
it's interesting too, because, you said you had this balance between art and, would you say art and business?
Yes.
But also you had this balance between dreams and reality.
Right.
That you kind of married to at the same time, in the sense of yeah, it's great to dream, but also you have to live and you have to be able to do the things that you want to do that involve the dreams. And so it's you have this nice balance of all these things. And I'm very jealous in a way. That's very good of you.
Please
to
don't
have
be.
the...
Because listen,
Yeah.
what I instill in my children now is when I went to my grandmother, and it's fine the way everything worked out.
Of course.
But I told her what the average salary was, right? But it could have been, you've been doing this all your life, or don't think in terms of average. What, you know what I mean? Where's your passion? And so that is a conversation. I didn't have anyone talking to me in that way. It was more so about, okay, you got to make money, period. And
Right.
so, and I knew I had to make money, so it was more about me. But like you said, I still was able to find a career where I was making the money that I wanted. And I stepped away from the arts, not so much in college because I still was in plays and did things like that. But my focus was on my career and making money. And that's what happened when I graduated from college. And I told you I started off an assistant buyer program, and I, continued that until I hit the bathroom floor.
Well, tell me, that
and so,
must be a moment.
Okay. So before I hit the bathroom floor, when I had my son, I found out I had a disease called Stargardt's disease. And what happened was my vision was starting to be off. And they tell you when you have a child that it can affect your vision. But after a year went by and things were getting really distorted, I was like, this doesn't feel right. Right. And so long story short, I went to a retina specialist and I got tested, and I found out I had an inherited disease called Stargardt's disease, which takes away your central vision. It keeps your peripheral intact. But you lose, whatever it is that you're looking directly at. And so, and it is progressive. And so at the time when I was diagnosed, I still had, most of my vision in both eyes, but the doctor at that time was preparing me by, first of all, because I just broke down crying.
Of course.
The go-getter in me, was like, okay, so so when he told me what my diagnosis was, I'm like, okay, so what surgery do I need?
How do we fix this?
Yeah. And I was like, can I get some new eyeballs? What do I need to do to get new eyeballs? What is it? And so he's like, there's nothing you can do. It's part of your DNA. And no matter what eyes you get, it's going to affect,
Interesting.
Yeah. And so
is it fairly common, or is it something that's pretty rare?
It's very rare. Both parents have to have it, or at least have the gene. My mother does not have it at all. And I don't know my father. So I'm not for sure if he, is walking around with it or not. But as a fact, he either is a carrier or he has it. And
Right.
my mother is a carrier because she doesn't have Stargardts where you can, see it. So yeah, it was mind blowing. But at the time when I was diagnosed, I still was able to see, like I still had most of my vision, so it didn't really affect me. And so the doctor handed me a Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass and was like, "All right, so this is going to be your future. You better learn Braille." And I was like, "What?" Like,
Yeah.
it was very
Not
traumatic.
that's not very good bedside manner we got there.
So, oh my God. So
Yeah.
anyway, fast forward. Oh, and then I said, "Am I going to be able to wake up and not be able to read my text messages?" I remember specifically asking
Oh,
that
really?
question. Like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Hmm.
It worked
It
like that
sounds
for
like,
me.
yeah. Oh, really? It was like an overnight.
So I woke up, no lie, looked at my phone, and I was like, and I started scrolling and I couldn't see, right? And so
Mm.
I was like, it's happening. Like the one thing that he said wouldn't happen is happening, and I just started freaking out, and it was just very, very traumatic, dramatic, all the things. And
Yeah. I can't
so
imagine. Was
it
it
was
was it up
terrifying.
to that moment though? Did you notice that things were progressing or
Yes.
okay.
So
Okay.
things were progressing, but as I said, I still had acuity in both eyes to where
Okay.
I still was able to drive. I was still able to do those things. And like so what happened which is also very rare, that one little central vision spot where I was able to see, it just like disappeared. And so then, my central vision just went flat.
Wow.
And so I had a much better doctor at that time. And so he
That's
had
good.
told me that, well, we knew this was going to come. And so he referred me to a low vision specialist. I had to call my job and was like, "You're not going to believe this," but I woke up, I couldn't read my text message, so it was just a whole situation.
Were they
So
aware? Or was that something that like you had given anyone notice about that?
yeah, they knew,
Okay.
because once I was kind of like letting them know, I had worked for this company for a while. And so I had
Hmm.
told them when things were going on, because we were all,
Yeah.
close, what was happening. So I was like, "You're not going to believe this. Like I can't read my text messages." And,
Right.
so they were like, "Well, do what you got to do, whatever." So I took some time off. I got devices. I learned how to see through these devices. And so I was like, "Yeah, grooving. I'm back." I went back to work. I had these big giant screens, and, we made all these accommodations. And what happened was, when I got to my job, I will say, and this is before working remote was,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
part of our culture. Not most of the companies still weren't doing remote. I couldn't drive at night, of course. I had got these bioptics that allowed me to do driving, not highway driving. I couldn't do nighttime driving, and I had limitations on, screen time and things like that. And so, just to make a long story short, when I got back to work, it wasn't very well received.
Oh,
Okay.
really? By them?
And so
Because
what
of the
happened?
accommodations, or did you feel like you were like the old version of you, like working and doing the things that you were doing, or did you also notice that you weren't able to do some of the functions
Well,
that you needed to?
I would say that when you're working with numbers and you have all these different spreadsheets, right? When you're giving a presentation and you're saying, "Okay, here's the number, this is my forecast," and I would
Right.
stay up late at night and prepare everything. And then they would say, "Okay, well, tell me what it was last year, week 2, day 4 and 5." Well, for someone who has a vision impairment, it's going to take
Right.
me up. So I'm standing in front of all these people, and then my anxiety starts to get up, and I'm like, trying to figure it out. Then
And
people
yeah.
start doing that. And
Yep.
so it created this unsafe culture for me.
Yeah.
And I ended
Toxic.
up, it was very, so that was starting my slow descent, right? Emotionally, because I came back ready to rock and roll. And
Right.
then when I didn't get the response that I thought I was going to get, and I started feeling myself start to descend. So I went on disability. Um,
What does that do
and
to your psyche?
no, well, I was told that I couldn't do the job. And then I
Yeah.
asked, "Well, what can I do?" And they were like, "Well, you can't even work in the mailroom because you can't
Mm.
see the mail." So it was really very traumatic.
Yeah.
traumatic
Does that
experience.
like break you? Because it sounds like you were pretty confident
I
and
was going
productive.
into it, but I'm telling you, once it got to that moment,
Yeah.
I was almost at rock bottom.
Yeah.
Almost
So
at
it
rock
breaks you
bottom.
to a point of like, you don't like soul searching essentially. Who am I? What
Who
value
am
do I
I? What
bring?
am I?
Like,
So
mm,
what does this look like? Like what if I'm not good enough to work in the mailroom? What am I good in? Like what can I
yeah.
do? You know, and these are all the questions I was asking myself. And in the meantime, I'm still a wife. I'm a mom. You know, I have these
Mm-hmm.
two small children, and so I'm like, well, let me try the housewife and try to do that. And I tried that, and it wasn't quite me. And as I started to, like you said, I just started to go downhill with my mind. I felt broken
Yeah.
inside. Things that I used to could see, I can no longer see. I start looking instead of thinking about looking at things from a positive. I just started seeing so many things, like what I couldn't do.
Right.
And
I think it's hard
so,
not to be that way. I would imagine that
yeah,
a lot of people would feel that way.
yeah. And so I went down to the floor, and I remember I was on the bathroom floor, and I was like, what's my purpose? Like,
Mm,
and I just didn't feel like I was even worthy to be here, to be honest.
yeah.
And so I was like, this is it. Like maybe that's just it. And that's when I heard God say, get
Mm,
up, truly. And so
yeah.
I was like, okay. And so I got up, I looked in the mirror. I didn't recognize myself at all. I was like, dirty hair, because when you're depressed,
Mm-hmm. You don't take care of yourself.
you don't. And I
Mm-mm.
didn't recognize, I truly didn't. And so the first thing I did when I was like, all right, I heard God tell me to get up, let me shower. So I just
Yeah.
went and kind of like cleansed, washed my hair. And then I heard God say, write a book. And so I was like, okay. And before that, let me tell you what I said. I said, God, tell me what you want me to do, and I will do it. Not only will I not get on that floor, I will help as many people as I can to not get
Mm.
on that floor. And then he said, write a book.
Have you, was this like your first experience in which you like actually heard of a voice of God of telling you like or helping you along, or was this something that like you've always kind of communed in that way and always heard stuff?
Mm-mm. So
This was
I
a first.
honestly, I had been going to church since I was a little girl, and I
Yeah.
thought that hearing the voice of God was only for pastors and things like that.
Mm. That
So
makes sense.
I did not know that I would even be in a position to be able to hear a voice. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I don't
Yeah.
know. I
Yeah.
thought it was just for pastors because I would hear it at church, God said, or, something like that. So when I heard that voice and it was clear as day, and then when I heard, write a book, I said, okay, that's it. I washed my hair and I said, I'm going to write a book.
Was
And
this ever something on your list? This is
was
like
not on my
something
list,
totally
but
brand new.
what I will say is when I went back to go look in my garage and I looked at some of my old like things from when I was a
Hmm.
little girl,
Yeah.
I found in middle school a book called From My Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul by Tarris Marie Rochelle Smith. That was my name. So that's what I saw. And I was like, oh my God. And I did not remember writing that, right? So when it was like, this book is about blah, blah, blah. So it was like I was trying to get, I guess it was
Right.
something in me that I didn't even realize that was there. And then I told you I had a journalism scholarship
Hmm.
to go to Florida A&M University. And so I guess it was just something I was keeping buried that I
Hmm.
just didn't, bring to life, but I sure heard it when I was in the shower. So when I heard that, I'm approaching 40 and I'm like, all right. So I sit in front of my computer in front of this blank piece of paper, or,
Yeah.
I got a big old screen that's like this big. And so I'm like looking at it and I'm like, got my magnification on like 800. So like,
You're like, what do I do?
what do I do? Because
Yeah.
I told you my career and everything
Right.
was in business. And so
And
all
fashion, it's like, what do, like, yeah, like how
it's like
he could have at least told you what kind of book to write.
And so let me tell you about the conflict, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, does this mean I'm supposed to write Christian literature? Like, I
Mm,
don't know. You
I
know what
could
I
see
mean? So
that. Yeah.
I didn't quite know.
Or your story. I would imagine a lot of people would feel that compelled to tell your story.
But you know what I did? I just opened my mind. And that's when I started hearing these characters talk to me. And so then they were like, going on these adventures and doing all these things. And a lot of them come from broken places.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started writing, and literally I haven't stopped. That was Juneteenth 2020. I write
Wow.
every single day.
Wow.
And I published my first
What a
novel
great day
last
to
year.
start too.
Oh, and I didn't even realize it was Juneteenth because
Juneteenth.
this
Yeah.
was COVID, right?
Right.
This was during COVID. Everybody was on lockdown, and so my air conditioner wasn't working
Oof.
in the house. It was just crazy, right? And then I'm like super sweaty and hot, and so I'm like, waiting on God to tell me what to do. And so then I was like, you know what, this is silly. Like, I don't know. And so then I was like, okay, Google, play Beyonce. I just wanted to hear some Beyonce to see what was
Yeah.
going to
Who
happen.
doesn't?
And then my Google just said playing Beyonce. So I heard the song. Okay, Google, stop. Okay.
I love it. Love our
So
technology.
right. And so, but that's what happened. But at the song that came on was Black Parade. And so she had released that on Juneteenth. So that's when, I said, okay, well, God's going to use Beyonce to talk to me. Then let me go ahead and then I started moving my fingers and looking at my big screen.
Yeah.
And like I said, I started writing and I just have not stopped. And I write women's crime of all things. I write fiction, novels. Yes. And love it. I love what I do. And
do you ever think that like maybe like this was just pushed down because you had your sight, you had your hear, you had all the things so you could kind of go after all those things in your childhood that you love to do, and this was just like something you could do, and now that you had some limitations in some of the things that you were doing, now you were able to hear the voices of your characters and the other things, because
you gotta speak it. That is exactly and that's why I said, you know what, so as I journeyed through, especially with writing, I became more, and even before the writing, let me just rewind a little bit. I was exploring, trying to figure out, like I told you, like who I was, what, but I did notice I started smelling things, think the way things smelled affected me differently, touch, because when you don't have your sight, you start depending on other senses.
Right.
And so being able to hone in on those other things really helps me with my writing. I talk a lot about smells, touching, and, all of that. And so these are things that you can take for granted, or at least I took for granted. But
I think most of us do.
But then once, you lose your, a certain sense. And like I said, I have my peripheral, but I don't have my central vision, which, I mean, anything you look at,
Right.
for me, it's just it's gone. Right. So the way that I feel and the way that I see it allows me to be able to pour that into my art.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a couple screenplays as well. I played around with some poetry, and I mean, everything just started coming out of me. So it was just
bottled
in
up
there
for a while.
I mean, and still I'm just continuously coming up with new ideas, coming up with new stories, and I do voice to text,
Yeah. Is that how you write your books?
Mostly. Or I'll use, like I told you, I magnify like 800 on my big screen. I'm doing this because it's like huge. And so I'll have like big words. But in my beginning stages, I like to talk, and then just let it type it out. And then I hear it back. And in retrospect, I was always a listener when it came to, even when I told you I used to be in plays and in high school and in college, and I would learn my scripts through listening. I would record my voice and then I would listen to it. And so it all kind of makes sense now. It was all leading me to this one moment in which I was able to, get up off that
really
floor.
Listen.
and then really hear, and then, hear God, and to, just be obedient to what he told me to do. And so my life mission now is to inspire others, because like I said, I just, being on that floor, I don't want anyone to feel that. And I want people to know that it's never, ever too late. It's never too late.
Yeah.
You can achieve whatever it is you put your mind to. I mean, who knew I would have been writing stories? I never, ever, if you would have said this to me, even though, like I told you, when I was a little girl, I used to do those things, but I had forgot. I mean, I didn't even remember that I had done all of that until I was just going through some of my old stuff. But if someone would have said, you're going to be a writer, I'd be like, ha, 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 that's funny. Even though my grandma, I remember asking my grandmother, she was a nurse. And I said, if there was anything that you could do, if it wasn't nursing, what would it be? And she was like, I would have been a writer. That's what my grandma said. I thought it was the cutest thing ever. But now I'm like, see, I just believe all these things that was happening, it's all spiritual, it was just going into my spirit.
Are you someone that believes that you had to hit that bathroom floor to find this new journey for you? Or do you think it would have been possible had you not reached the depths that you did?
That's a really good question. I don't know, because all I can say is I was on that floor. So, and that
sometimes
was the
we don't
only...
listen until we get to that.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we don't hear the things that we need to hear until we hit that bottom, if you will.
And I mean, a lot of times I've never heard anyone just say, oh, I was happy yesterday and then today I'm on the floor. I mean, it's typically a descent, that, first you find yourself in the bed sleeping, you just find yourself just sitting on the couch first. And then, it's just, it happens in stages. And so for me to, like you said, I went through all those stages. I mean, I can sit here and just remember the tiredness, the feeling that I had until I ended up on the floor, and there's nowhere lower than that other than death,
Does that, looking back at those moments, does that make you celebrate where you are now even more so?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even if, and how do I say this? Prior to that, I never thought, and I hope this comes out properly, but I never thought that I would be a person that would end up on the floor, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, I done been through so much. Like, my mom left when I was a little girl. I didn't have a dad. I died. Like, I did that, been there, done that, and I was kind of like approaching life in this way to where I didn't think that I was capable of my mind getting to that point.
Turns out you're a human too. Right? I mean,
that's it. That part.
We can't predict anything.
You can't.
And you have to kind of just move through, like you said, with like, when you can, you find these silver linings in a moment. And even if it is, I showered today, like if you're in that space and it's like, I made a meal for the family today, like you celebrate the little things and eventually we can pull ourselves out.
Absolutely.
It's kind of interesting. I talked the episode that came out today, the day that we're recording this, was a gentleman, Chad Foster, who at about in his 20s, he lost his vision completely.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
What he told me was that it was like this at his point in life now, it's like a gift that was presented to him in the ugliest wrapping paper that he's ever seen.
Right.
Because it opened his eyes, like you were saying. Oh, I guess I shouldn't say. It opened his mind to things that he never even considered that he could do. And now that he didn't have that one thing that so many other people do have, he was able to achieve even more than if we would just assume that we should have it. Like you said, kind of just like we just take for granted these things. Right. And now he's living out loud and like taught himself to ski and do all these things. And I'm like, I don't even want to, like, I can't even imagine doing that. And so like, I think until we hit these points.
Yes.
I mean, I wish we could learn before, but sometimes we have to hit these points where we're like, oh, this is the good part, like these are the things. And even in my sense, like, losing my mom, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, a child or anything. But now that I look back, now that I'm in my 40s and I look back at that experience, it taught me so much. All the
Right.
things that came from that made me the person that I am today. And so,
Right.
to
Right.
your point of finding that silver lining, finding the good in the bad things is something that we could all practice a little bit more, I think.
Yes. And I think that it helps that, I love that you have this platform that because it allows people to see that I'm not the only one, right?
Yeah.
Because when I was going through my vision, when I was losing my vision and when I woke up and could see, I felt that no one could relate to what I was going
Right.
through, And so you mentioned, what's his name, Chad?
Chad Foster. Yeah.
I watched it. And so I said, oh my God, because
Yeah.
he went to Harvard. I mean, he did all these amazing things, and seeing that motivated me, right? A legally blind woman. And I'm seeing, this man talk about all these wonderful things that
Right.
he's doing and the things that he's accomplished. And so it motivates, he's a public speaker, I'm like,
What can I
taking
do?
notes.
What else can I do?
You know
Right.
what I mean? I'm
Exactly.
taking notes. And that's what your platform did for me, so that's what the hope is, as we, have these conversations,
Yeah.
and hopefully someone will be able to watch it, and even if they're not legally blind or whatever, like, haven't had my experience, well, if they feel themselves, like I'm saying, going to the floor, it's
Right.
like you can stop yourself before you get there,
Yeah.
and like you said, celebrate those small wins. And I'm gonna tell you what else. I got therapy.
Yeah. It's a good thing. It's
I
helpful.
got professional help, once I got up, and I was like, okay, I can't do this alone.
Right.
I need some help. And so, I do that with no shame. I talk about that all the time. I thanked my
Yeah.
therapist in my book. She got a special acknowledgement line because she said, "Are you okay?" And first I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." And then I was like, "No, I'm not."
That right there, that's the important step, I think, is when we
Hmm.
can admit to ourselves that we're not okay. And
Right.
that's okay to
Right.
not be okay,
Right.
because again, we're human and
Yes.
life will hit you in all sorts of ways. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And
Right.
so, like, it's okay to not be okay. And I love that you found therapy and you found someone that would listen to you unbiased. Not that our family
Right.
around us,
Oh, absolutely.
they want to hear us, but
Right.
they're not listening to us in the same way as like a therapist, a third party
Right.
might, and sometimes we
Absolutely.
just need to be able to say the thing, and maybe we, skirt around the issue with the people we love because we don't want them to be worried about us.
Right.
But yeah, I'm glad that you brought up therapy. I think it's so
Yes.
important. And I think we're,
Yes.
in 2024, I think maybe people, it's not like a stigma maybe as
Right.
much as it used to seem like it. If you admitted
Right.
you were going to therapy, they were like, what's wrong with you? And you can go to therapy and nothing's wrong with you,
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I love that helped you in that way. Tell me a little
Yes.
bit more about like your first book and how you got it to publishing.
Okay.
Like what does that journey look like for you
Oh
in
my
this new
goodness.
version of Tarris?
Yes. So, so as I said, I wrote and I started writing, and I was like, oh my God, I kind of got, I'm Googling, I'm going to YouTube University, and I'm doing all these things trying to teach myself. And so I'm like, I kind of came up with a little idea, and I'm like, okay, this feels right. So I start sending out my manuscript to
Mm.
different publishers, and this editor is like, you need a writing coach.
Mm.
So I'm like, oh, what? Say what? Like, I can't get this published? Like, let's go. It's just like, yeah, there are some key elements that you need in order to make a novel. So I call this man, he's my Yoda, my literary Yoda. And so I hired a writing coach named
That's
Bruce
awesome.
McAllister. He's amazing. And so he was a professor for 30 years. So even though he's a writing coach now, he was a teacher, at heart. And so I was a fast learner, and I was like soaking in all the information. And so he just took me to school, just teaching me scene development, character development, and all the things. And so it took maybe about a good 90 days for me to revamp my whole manuscript. And he said, well, this looks good. Like, we couldn't believe it. Right. And so he was like, let's just do a test and see what happens and see if you can get an agent. And so I sent it out and, to 6 different agents. And then one of them I actually, got. And within a year, I had my first like publishing deal. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And so
How
was
does
my
that make you
journey.
feel when you get that, like, yes, you got a publishing deal?
You know, I couldn't, I was able to sit in it, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful moment for me.
Yeah.
And
Did
I
that feel
am,
different than the other wins in your life?
oh my goodness, you're asking the most wonderful questions. I would say yes, because once you've gone to that bottom place,
Mm-hmm.
and once you do something and realize that it's not about me, right? Because as I said, and I want to make sure I'm saying this right, but it's not going to be perfect. But, I was chasing the money
Yeah.
originally. And, I had a career and as you can see, what happened was I still hit rock bottom, right? So it's like all the money and all the things that I had, it didn't even matter. So once I figured out and found something that gave me purpose,
Mm.
where and I said, even if someone doesn't buy Black Pearl, if I can help someone not get on the floor, if I can be, or if I can, or just someone hearing my voice or hearing my story can help them in some way, then I've done my job, right? So getting published was the icing on the cake, because when God told me to write, I didn't know where it was going to lead me, right? I didn't know if it was just going to be, I'm just going to write just for fun. And even though he said
Mm-hmm.
write a book, I didn't know exactly where it was going to take me.
That
But
could be
when I was,
anything.
right. So when I was telling, friends and family, like what my book was about, they was like, that sounds like a movie. And actually I did get a movie deal, but I turned it down. That's a whole nother
Mm.
story. But yeah, like everything was just right. It just felt right. And, it definitely was just a beautiful moment, and more so just about that I was doing something that I was meant to do,
Yeah.
and realizing, like I said, it's not just for me and it's not just about me. I start thinking in terms of legacy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like no one can take this from me. Like I have a published novel, right? And I
Yeah.
have another one that's coming out in January.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and so it's just opened the doors, and just being true to who, I'm in this space, in this place where I'm being true to who I am, no
Yeah.
matter with the imperfections. I talk a lot about that. No more mask, taking the mask off.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. Living out
be,
loud.
yep, because that's what I was doing for a while. I was just like, oh, I'm good, everything's
Mm.
good, when it
But to be
wasn't.
fair, I think a lot of us were taught, like, society taught us to be that way.
Mm,
So I don't think it was just you. Like, I think we're
mm-hmm,
all just
right,
like, you don't show your flaws and you don't show the broken parts. And like,
right.
I'm sure you understand this now. Those things are what make us interesting.
Oh my
Those are the
God,
things that make us connect. Like,
correct.
I can't relate to someone that just got this crazy promotion or some crazy award, but I sure can relate to when they're feeling like really crappy, and like we
Mm-hmm.
can talk that through, and now we both feel like humans together versus,
Yes,
the celebrations that I think growing up I was always taught, like, you just got to get the next promotion, you just need to buy
right.
the bigger house, you just need to get a
Yes,
better car, like,
yes,
and now it's like you getting a publishing deal, getting a book published, that didn't exist. Like,
right.
that book didn't exist. Like, you
Mm,
created that from nothing.
right,
Whereas in your former life, you were just getting the next job that someone
right,
else decided what that job looked like. And
right.
maybe you made it your own, but you were still kind of following some kind of formula. This
Yep.
started with a blank page, and you
Yes.
created something that now you can celebrate and sit in and be like, I mean, it's kind of like, I guess, like having a kid, right? Like, you created that.
Right.
So I
Absolutely.
can
It's my
see why
baby.
how that would be just like so fulfilling in this like
Yes.
indescribable way.
Right. And it was like, you know what? And I don't like to recognize the negativity, right? you know how people like, tell the haters, blah, blah, blah. I don't really like to do that.
No.
But like, I don't even like to give it energy. But I will say that, I did have a moment like, I remember when I was told that I couldn't even work in the mailroom,
Hey, but that's funny because you also said you listened to, wouldn't call them haters, but you listened to someone that was like, you need a writing coach. Like
Right.
that could be seen in your previous world, like you're not good enough, right? But you took it as, no, you're right.
Yes.
I could
Right.
use this,
Right.
like, so there's a flip in the
It is.
way you described your former life and the things that you
Right.
were doing and how you approached that. So even that, you like gave it air and it helped you. So,
Very
I mean,
true. Very true.
there's that element to that. I mean, congratulations on
Thank
first
you.
book, but also congratulations on upcoming book. That's so
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you so much.
Are you just going to keep like banging them out? Like, what's
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah, so Black Pearl is my first one and I'm coming up on the 1 year anniversary. And then I have the Empress Creed that's coming out in January. And then that following November, I have one called Black Juliet that's coming out. And it's
I guess that's what happens when
BLACE.
you write every day.
Yeah. Right. You just turn. I told you, I just couldn't stop. I started writing. And one of the things I will say that I had to learn also is I went too far on that end, because when I was writing every day, I wasn't sleeping, so I started going too far over because I was like, oh, I got to get it done. Because to be honest, for a minute, I was scared that I was going to lose it. Right. Because I was like, where is this even coming from? Like all of this, like ideas, and, it was like a new space and place for me. And I truly was scared that I was going to maybe lose it. I was like, well, what if it goes away? So I was just like, wasn't sleeping. I'm walking around like a zombie,
that's not good.
Wasn't getting any sleep. And so I had to then, find a balance and be able to be present, for my kids and my husband, and, making sure that I have work hours and, do all the things and treat it, like a career, like a job. Right. But still, now don't get me wrong. There may be times when, like I'm working on this new baby and it's a little Western. And so, if she starts like talking to me in my sleep, I have to get up and just, write down what she's saying real quick. And then I'll get back into bed, so that does happen. That is part of the, because I want things to happen, naturally, but also I hope I'm making sense. Just finding that balance, making sure I'm not going too far to where I'm depriving myself of, sleep and all the things that you need in order to make sure you stay healthy.
Yeah, that's important. Otherwise, you won't be able to write any more books if you're not healthy. So you need to find that balance. Do your kids or your husband say anything about who you are now compared to who you were before? Did they notice a difference? Are you different? Like, are you more joyful because you're kind of living in this space?
Yeah, you know what?
Or they're just like your mom.
That's what I was going to try to separate it. So yeah, like with my kids, I just feel like, I'm mom, I hit a lot, so they didn't really like, they know now. I mean, because they hear me talking, they've seen some of my podcasts. They're like, Mommy, we didn't know you were on the floor. Like, so then I try to be open with them and say, Mom, like, just like I talk to you, but I make it age appropriate. But I say, Mommy wasn't Mommy wasn't feeling well. And, so now I make sure that if I'm tired or if something's going on, I don't just say, oh, I'm good. It's like, Mommy, take a nap.
You're teaching them. They're seeing that, and that's going to be great for them as adults.
Yes, I'm telling you, so, and that's again, taking that mask off in all forms. And, my husband reads my work and he's supportive, and, does
he tell you when it's not good? Is it ever good?
Good.
I knew you were going to say that. Somehow I knew that.
No, I'm my worst critic. And, to be honest, I don't really give him, like, I don't tell him.
You're just like, read it. Don't tell me what to say about it.
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
take his feedback, but it's like I usually wait until I'm at a good space and place to
Fair.
be able to like when I know that I've already done it, because it's
Yeah.
like I can kind of feel it where, it's like, ooh, this feels good, So then that's usually when I share because I am the only child, right? So sometimes I like my me time. And so, I get kind of like in this little
Yeah.
beautiful space and place where, I create. And not all those ideas are good. And I know that, right? But
Yeah.
it's just
Well, that's
fun
good.
to just play around, and
Yeah.
just see, because sometimes something beautiful may come out of it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. No, I love
so
that.
I don't always share all those little things with him until it gets to the point where I feel comfortable to get
Yeah.
like feedback where it's like,
Right.
what do you think about this versus that, especially if I write from a male perspective. So I'm
That's
like,
helpful. Yeah.
you know, so
Sounds like you know what you're doing.
I'm trying.
I
I'm
love to
learning
kind
as I
of,
go.
hey, I love to kind of wrap these conversations up with a question. And I'm wondering if you could go back to the Tarris that woke up that day and couldn't see the text messages on her
Mm.
phone. And this version of you, what would you want to say to her about this journey that she was about to go on?
Mm. Wow. If I could go back and talk to myself, is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
like if you could talk to you, knowing what you know now and this journey that you found this joy again, and
Yes.
that Terrace that woke up that morning and looked at her
Right.
phone and didn't see the things she was expecting to see on that phone.
I
What would you
would
want to say?
I would tell her to be true to herself, put faith over fear, and it will be okay.
Yeah, just believe in yourself,
It will be
trust it.
okay.
Mm,
Faith, you know, don't don't be scared, Faith, make sure you keep your faith intact and just be true to who you are. you
yeah,
know I think I would definitely, and then it's okay. I think a lot of times when we're going through things, just hearing that you're okay is important, because a lot of times that's the part that's the kicker, because you don't feel like you're going to be okay. You're like, it's so painful. It's like, I'm it's like, yeah, you may not feel it in this moment, but you're going to be okay. Like,
yeah.
the sun is going to come up tomorrow, right? So you
She'd probably be
truly,
like, "You did what? You wrote a book? You wrote two books? You wrote a
oh,
third book?"
oh my goodness. Like, I can't even, when you said go back, I just felt, when I looked at that phone, it just took me back to
Mm,
truly, like, I could remember what that feeling lost, and just feeling like, what am I going to do? And that, I just remember just feeling all over the place.
yeah,
But, just knowing that, you're going to be all right, and to, do not be scared. And that is that, my anxiety goes up all the
yeah.
time. But it's like, making sure I just keep my faith first, and just know that, God got you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look where you are. Look, you did it, and you're
Yes,
still doing it.
yes,
And who knows what the next 10 years are going to bring in this journey that you're creating for yourself now. And you trust yourself. So I think
absolutely. Oh, I
it's really,
love that. Trust
yeah,
yourself. That is
yeah,
so major, and it's so hard, because you start thinking about, well, I got this due and that due and all these bills, but, God had me, and in more ways than one, because, I was able to hear his voice. Thank God. Thank you,
mm,
God. I was able to, I was able to hear his voice, because, sometimes, like you said, people don't get to even hear that. So I was able to actually hear that, and
and listen.
and yes, and I made a commitment. And that's why I'm like, no matter what platform I'm on, I make sure I tell my story, and, and make sure that, I give God the glory. And also that I want people to know, that, it's never too late.
Mm-hmm. I mean, give yourself some of that credit too. I think, you've done the work, you've done a lot.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
so if people want to like kind of get in your orbit, they want to learn more about your books or
Mm-hmm.
connect with you, what's the best way to find you?
Okay. You can find me on social media at Tarris Marie. That's on Facebook and Instagram. You can go to my website at www.tarrismarie.com, or you can go to blackodyssey.net. That's where you can see all my books that are going to be coming out as
Awesome.
well. So any of
Well,
those platforms, you should be able to find me.
we'll definitely put those links in the show notes so people can easily find you and connect with you and read your books and order your books and do all the things and
Thank
connect with
you.
you, or even reach out and tell you that you made a difference and
Oh my
what you
God.
said connected with them and made them feel less alone, because I'm sure that someone listening right now is feeling that way. And so if you
Yes.
are, I'm sure Tarris would love to hear from you
Yes,
and hear
please.
that. So thank you for allowing me to hold this space and have these questions for you and for you to answer them. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful questions, and thank you for having me. I truly appreciate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening. If something that Tara said resonated with you, or you think someone in your life needs to hear this story, please share this episode with them. We would love that. And I will say goodbye for now. I will be back next week with a brand new episode of the Life Shift podcast. Thanks again, Tarris.
Thank you.